Welcome to episode 209 of the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. I am Dave Deacon, and we've got a pretty exciting episode for you. We sit down with the first female to lead the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, commonly called ODAF, the Honorable Secretary Blayne Arthur. Secretary Arthur travels the world representing Oklahoma agricultural producers and is proud to say that she comes home to a farm that she and her family share at the end of a country road in rural Oklahoma. We'll talk about that and her career devoted to agriculture and the Oklahomans who live it. Before that, we'll get an update on the crops that are going into the bin and the wheat that is going into the ground across the state. As always, you will be able to find that information and everything that we talk about on our website, reddirtagronomy.com. So let's start with a quick trip around the table for an introduction to the dream team of dirt and everything that grows from it. Let's start with Oklahoma State University Extension Cropping System Specialist.
There was a quote over the summer that says the U.S. has probably the safest and the most secure food chain in the world, but it has probably the lowest perceived safety.
Dr. Josh Lofton. Next to him is a guy who actually taught MacGyver everything that he knows, and then he decided to take his skills to Oklahoma State University's Biosystems and Ag Engineering Department.
So to me, it's something. It's like, okay, get a little bit of experience here, and then put a pencil to it.
Dr. Randy Taylor. And across from him is Oklahoma State University Extension Precision Nutrient Management Specialist.
We were both alum, Class 15, Ag Leadership, 2-year program. I can't remember how many times you get to see the state. We saw forestry, we saw catfish, we saw panhandle, we saw canna flowers, far southwest cotton.
Dr. Brian Arnell. The doctors really do enjoy hearing from you and answering your questions, so if you have one about soil or crop production, jump over to reddirtagronomy.com and leave your questions there, and we will discuss your question on the next podcast. Let's kick things off with an update on the crops across Oklahoma, and with that, we hear from Oklahoma State University's Dr. Josh Lofton. As you listen to Josh's pontification of cropping wisdom, remember this was recorded on September 21st, 2023, and the update reflects that. You are listening to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. Josh, how are the crops looking across Oklahoma right now?
I mean, it just really just depends on where you're at.
Right.
Some good corn's coming out, some really good milo's coming out, but then some really bad corn and some really bad milo are all coming out. So we have a good mix. I think we are seeing a good blend of things with both corn and the milo. I haven't heard of anybody cutting beans yet. I know they're getting really close, and that's a bad thing, right? Because that just means that they're maturing out a little early, and we have heard some rumblings of some small beans and some really small pods and some aborted pods. So I think we're going to have that. Talking to Troy with NAS today, and he was saying that the numbers have looked really good as averages, but he said, yeah, it's a mixed bag of about everything. So I know wheat's kind of gone in the ground and probably sitting there for the most part. I know at least we didn't get the rain we were expecting to earlier this week, but I think wheat's starting to be slung in pretty much across the state if they're going to graze it. So everything looks okay. We didn't quite get the widespread rain that they said we were going to get earlier this week, which I think is a not so great thing. But later corn looks good. So, I mean, we're moving. We just need more consistent rain, especially this time of year when consistent rains are our thing. We need more of the consistency. As
I was heading up to Manhattan last week or earlier this week, I saw corn being harvested, and I did see some soybeans, but I don't know what the quality was in those fields just right up by the Kansas border.
Yeah, it's all of our stuff that came out that is ready to harvest doesn't look as good as it should.
Right.
And I think so if you're a little bit closer to harvest, it's probably not the quality and the yield that you probably want it to. There's still some stuff that's a couple weeks off, and that probably has a little bit better potential. The stuff that's kind of matured really fast is probably that way because there's not a whole lot of beans or good sized beans in there.
So Brian, with all of those conditions, how is nutrition in the soil looking across the state? I know it's variable, especially with all of the quality of rain that we have or have not got.
Well, what we're looking at right now is the questions of for the graze outs, the wheat's going in, where we have moisture, where we don't have moisture. Still going on with this. So my deal is if you're going to be grazing your wheat, if you want a soil test, of course, but if you haven't, we need that 50 to 60 pounds down right now. I don't want to go heavier than that. What we're looking at, my concern is, it's not like we can go into any wheat field that has 4 foot of soil moisture right now. So the rains we're getting are still shallow. If we get a rain, we're living kind of shallow in the system. We're not really building our profile. That's why that missed out rain was going to be a potential for some of us to get soil profile building. We're getting rains. We're just talking about it on the radar, starting to rain as we're doing this podcast. So we need those rains to come through to really help fill that soil profile. And like Josh said, the regular rains is we're trying to fill up from our summer hot, dry period. And so nitrogen right now needs to be limited to what you would make in a decent but okay fall grazing pattern, meaning we get some rains to get grow. Don't get crazy with the nitrogen because we have a long ways to go until we really start looking good and can start pouring the coals to it. Say on the pasture side, if we get these rains, this is the time where you might be looking at some of that fescue, bumping that up a little bit, try to get some of that secondary cool season push. Bermuda grass has tailed off. Don't do anything on those warm season grasses. They're pulling off. But if we're trying to push that fescue, now would be a time to give it a little bump if you're getting the rain. I mean, Miami got almost 5 inches in 2 days, so we've got pockets of wet.
Yeah.
And the fescue would be up in Miami. Yeah.
Miami or Beaver.
Well, right. And so the beans, I had a farmer we had beans on up in Ottawa County where we've got beans in the north part and south part. The south part got swamped and turned to hay. The north part's looking great. So we're talking our rainfall distribution pattern is really spotty.
And who wants to take the dusted in wheat? Because
what about the dusted in?
Well, how does that look right now with a couple of rain events, moving across, but then also relying on the existing soil moisture?
I haven't been out and about right now, but our Payne County stuff, I've been around Payne County, is shot out. It got about a week ago, we got about 3/10, 4/10. It was enough to germ it.
Yeah.
And so if we keep these cool temps, we catch a rain or two, it's going to be looking good. And if we catch the rains, we might have some of the best fall grazing we've had in a couple years, but we've got to catch that and we've got to stay cool.
The one issue we do have with that dusted in wheat, if you didn't catch that rain or you planted after it and you didn't have soil moisture, it's these 10th inch rainfall events.
Right.
That's where we're running in, or where we consistently run into a problem where we get partial germ. And, that's again, why we like big, consistent rains that are, 3/10 of an inch, 4/10 of an inch. I mean, we got a lot of herbicide that's gone down since we've had, a nice, good rain and all that. So we need at least a good, quarter to a half inch pretty much across the state.
Right.
Outside of a few places that got quite a bit over the last, but I think everybody wouldn't complain with a good half inch over the weekend. So,
Josh, where are we with the cotton crop?
It just depends on if you're going to harvest it or
not.
Right. I think a lot of folks, have probably zeroed out or are well on their way to zeroing out. There's some really good looking cotton around the state. It's outside of some of the stuff that I've seen on the Milo, might be our best crop as far as like the best of the best this year. But they got some good fields and bad fields, like we have everything else. But it's still a little bit behind. So I think that's a big question mark. And every time with cotton, especially when you get north of I-40, it's when's that freeze date. Yep. And if we got a long fall, we have a chance to pull in some really nice cotton this year. If it's really short fall, there's some of those fields that might not be able to fully finish. So, I mean, we're still at a roll of the dice. The cotton's chugging along. It needs more heat days. So, while wheat needs the cooler days, the cotton needs the warmer days still to go ahead and finish out and fill in those last bowls. So,
okay. I guess we'll just dive in now. Brian, do you want to introduce our guest?
You can.
Well, no, you do it.
She's been, promoting you across the nation.
That's right.
Well, our special guest today on the podcast, we have Secretary of Agriculture, Blayne Arthur, and Blayne, thank you for joining us on the podcast today. Give us a rundown of who Blayne Arthur is.
Oh gosh, I wasn't expecting that question. Well, thank
Just get
you.
ready for that.
Right.
Thank you for the invite. Short version of who Blayne Arthur is. Lifelong Oklahoman, grew up in Grady County, very typical 4-H and FFA kid. We raised wheat and soybeans and horses and cattle.
Right.
Went to school at Oklahoma State and have had several different positions, some in the private sector. Had the opportunity to be the director of the 4-H Foundation here in Stillwater, which was wonderful, and had worked at the Department of Ag for 2 other secretaries of Ag. Wonderful opportunities there. And then in 2018, we had another gubernatorial election, and this guy that nobody knew named Kevin Stitt got elected governor, and he called and asked if I would come work for him. So wonderful opportunity there to work for the governor starting in 2019. I'm married. I've got 2 kids. My husband is a full-time cattle producer. I do always put the caveat in, though, we raise show cattle, because some of the commercial guys will fuss at us a little bit about that. Raise show cattle full time, and then have 2 kids that are kind of your typical ag kids.
Right.
They show and go to a small school and sports and all the things. So just kind of very typical Oklahomans, I guess, really. So.
I saw one's getting an opportunity to do a little bit of judging with Daddy.
Yeah.
It looked
Yes,
like that was some cool stuff.
That was pretty neat over the weekend. My husband judges a decent amount, kind of across the U.S. And then so Kansas State Fair this past weekend, my son got to go judge with him. So that was a very, very neat opportunity.
Why you've had the opportunity to live in places around Oklahoma. Why did you choose to live in a small town? What is the draw to basing out of a small town?
I like to say that a small town, certainly here in Oklahoma, but really probably across the U.S., can grow our very best people.
Yeah.
And I know we've got good folks all across the state, but I think it's always interesting. Even when we look at OSU, you start looking at some of faculty members, professors, you start looking at all those folks, and then you ask where they're from, and they're from towns like Leedy and
Right.
Shattuck and, these tiny places. And for us, it's very unique because our kids go to a small place, everyone gets to know each
Right.
other. It's just a different dynamic than you have some other places. And I think, too, there's also the accountability factors of our kids know if they were to get in trouble at school, we'd know before they got home, right? So hopefully that's not the case. But there's just a unique flavor to living and growing up in a small town. People care about each other. They take care of each other. And I think that's hard to duplicate in big cities sometimes. So for us, it's a wonderful fit for our family and for what we want to kind of instill in our kids' lives.
So saw you recently a new appointment, or tell us a little about that national position.
Right.
Yes. So there is a group of all of our ag commissioners, which is a National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, because it can get a little confusing. Depending on where you're from, you might be a secretary, a commissioner, or a director, depending on where you're from in the U.S. But that group, covers all 50 states and the 4 territories. And I have the chance to serve as the president of this group for this next year through September. So a great opportunity to hopefully highlight Oklahoma. I think the thing that's been so interesting to be part of that group is I think sometimes, and I think it's because Oklahomans are so humble, right? That we don't think about us being as big of an ag state as we really are. But just, earlier to y'all's discussion, we're talking about wheat, we talk about cotton. We've also got a forestry industry.
That's
we're
right.
huge in cattle. Well, when I start talking to my counterparts, some of them may have a few pieces of that, but there's not very many places that have as much diversity within the ag industry as we do in Oklahoma.
Right.
And we've got that diversity, but we've also got folks that are, kind of top of their field in those different commodity groups. So it's been fun to learn about other places and just get to have a little different lens into what ag looks like. I give my I-State friends a little bit of a hard time and tell them they're not going to tell us all what we can do, right?
Right.
But it's been good. Learned a lot and then too, you learn about, some states they're talking about shellfish and we're like, that's not it. Do you know what I mean? Like, we don't do that. So just how different ag is. And it's a wonderful group. Our really thing we always want to tout about NASDA is it is nonpartisan. And that's the thing I kind of love about ag is, as a general rule, the politics usually go away when we talk about ag issues here at the state level or at the national, as a general rule.
Right.
And I think it's one of those kind of last spaces where, because that room, you got lots of folks who are appointed like me, and they work for governors of a different party than our governor here, but that isn't, part of the discussion. It's just what's good for farmers and ranchers. So it's a neat group to be a part of and look forward to the next year.
Even as you were vice president last year,
yes,
right?
Sir.
So, and you were down at you were in Mexico negotiating or working on some agreements on some shipping. So tell us, how do you get into that? And it's
well, I sometimes I wake up and I'm like, did they really ask the right person to show up at this meeting today? I ask myself that a lot. But we have, so they call it the Tri-National Accord. So Canada, U.S., and Mexico. So talking about all the pieces of USMCA. Of course, we call it USMCA here. They call it CUSMA in Canada. It's, depending on which country you're from, you put them at the beginning of the list. But the interesting part about that is such a wonderful agreement, certainly with our two biggest trading partners here in North America. But there's some sensitive issues, just to be very transparent. If we want to talk about corn in Mexico, that gets sensitive real quick. If we want to talk about dairy in Canada, that gets sensitive real quick. So the purpose of that is we have, they'll split into a bilateral discussion. So U.S. talks to Mexico, and then U.S. and then we have a trilateral discussion. But we have some pretty frank conversations with our counterparts to say, hey, how can we get to a better spot here? Do you know what I mean? And try for everyone to find some compromise in there, because USMCA is so important, but there's some pieces of it that could use a little bit of work. But those are very, very productive, but also acknowledging that as we sit on the other sides of the table, sometimes there's some strong opinions on the other side of the issue, and we try to sort through that the best that we can.
So you mentioned earlier that we're a very diverse state. I talk about it in my classes from elsewhere that we're one of the few states that can say we have alligators and antelope. So besides the challenges,
I'm going to steal that by the way, and I'll credit you. But
besides the challenges, the diversity, when you look at the scale you're at now and what you're doing, well, I guess there'll be a two-part. I want to go back. Sorry, guys, I want to go back. What was the learning process to get? Because Grady County. You're also, Payne County, that learning process of how diverse Oklahoma is. Where did you get that education? How did you go about, and how are you still learning now?
A big part of it, when I first went to work at the Department of, I guess I should scroll back even further than that. My first job out of school was working for Rural Enterprises Incorporated, which is out of Durant. And just to be honest, I had not spent a lot of time in southeastern Oklahoma. Do you know what I mean? I was raised more on the western side of 35 and just had not spent a lot of time down there. I traveled a lot. We did small lending for small businesses. So that was certainly some exposure there. But then I first went to work at the Department of Ag in 2009. And, one of our largest divisions is our forestry division. And for a kid who's raised on the west side of 35, I was like, forestry division is our largest division here? What? So some of it was just certainly the opportunity to be at the agency and get to interface with all the different commodity groups. I say Western Oklahoma, I was not the expert on cotton by any stretch of the imagination. We just didn't grow a lot of cotton in Grady County. I know it's moving further north than it ever has before. But I think it was just, you realize what you grow up around. Right. And two, none of us in this room probably had the luxury of, our cell phones and internet and all this information that's kind of flooded at kids now, which I think there's probably the good and the bad pieces of that. But then too, you get to meet the best part of working in the Department of Ag is I've gotten to meet producers from everywhere, everywhere in the state of Oklahoma. And you say, okay, tell me, how do you make this work? Do you know what I mean? Are you running cows? Are you raising cotton? And what do you do and how does it work? And talk about learning more every single day. There's always something that I wasn't familiar with. I mean, some of our programs at the agency, I'll call one of our staff members and be like, okay, I have never heard of this cucurbit disease before. Can someone come help me? What are we talking about? I mean, you could never know everything about the ag world. It's just impossible. So learn every single day. And two, try to really, if I'm at a meeting or a conference or even at the agency, if it's something that I'm not familiar with, I really want to key in and say, okay, like, tell me more about this because I want to understand it and learn about it. And we've got so many amazing experts. Well, just at OSU, when you look at the talent that we have at OSU that's recognized across the U.S. from the ag side, it's pretty incredible.
So if you look at it now, going back to the national scale and what you're doing, is it good or bad that our state is so diverse versus maybe a corn state?
It kind of depends on who you ask, honestly. I think it's an opportunity because we're not locked into one commodity so much as we are other places, right? That there is this chance for producers to pivot, to say, okay, I'm gonna have beans this year, but maybe and canola's maybe coming back. I don't know. Y'all can tell me if it is or not. That's a big discussion. But I think the diversity gives us a lot of opportunity, especially the Oklahoma weather. I know we've talked some about the moisture and the rain. It's a brutal place sometimes to be an ag producer. So if we weren't so diverse, I don't know how a lot of these places are able to survive, because you've got to figure out what's the next thing out there. Now, conversely, when we talk about our I-State friends, they carry a real big stick when we start talking about corn or ethanol or whatever the topic might be. So that makes a big difference. But I think there's always something. If a producer there's always some commodity or something for a producer to pivot to, and I think that's a good thing.
The last 3 days, Josh was talking about how excited he was to have Blayne Arthur into the podcast. I'm waiting for him to come up with some of your conversation.
I'm just getting sit here, man. Well, that's what I always do.
That's true. Well, I'll go ahead and ask a question. You mentioned forestry being one of the larger industries in your department that you have to deal with. Talk about what it's like to make the call whenever we're in a drought and there's wildfire, and the governor and you are having conversations and relocating resources from Southeast Oklahoma to Woodward or Guyman, and I mean that's quite an undertaking.
It sure is. Our forestry division, they're based primarily on the eastern side of the state and southeastern. But when in 2019, when I got the chance to come back to the department, our state forester is a guy named Mark Goller, who is respected across the nation for his expertise. He's an amazing guy, period. But certainly when we talk about fire and incident command, and Mark said, Blayne, it's because we had gone through the horrible fires in northwest Oklahoma, the Ray fire there. And he said, I think what we need to do is, when, they follow all the data and, predictions, he said, I think we need to pre-position these guys when the weather acts like it's going to be that severe. So we decided, starting in 19, instead of waiting until we have a situation, Guyman, Woodward, you pick the town, that we now will have those teams go ahead and deploy out there. And we acknowledge that sometimes they sit there for a day or two and don't have anything to do. But we would rather have that happen because it takes them 5 or 6 hours, excuse me, even if they're ready to go, right? It's a long way up there. And we've had multiple different situations where they were able to link up with those rural fire departments, those volunteer fire departments, and get on the front end of something. And we still had two, I guess was that just last summer, 2 very significant fires. We had the Hitchcock fire, and then we had the fire at Moreland, which was 20,000 acres. And when we're in a drought situation, it doesn't take long once one of those gets started. And we know our rural fire departments and our volunteer fire departments, manpower wise and equipment wise, they just don't have, there's just not enough capacity. But 2, those are tricky when all the state suddenly is on fire. Do we pull folks out of the protection area? Do we deploy folks? We got to work with emergency management. So I certainly rely on the expertise of Mark and his team to give guidance, but we would much rather proactively tackle those situations when we can, to protect certainly human life and property. But boy, when it gets really, really dry, like when we had this run of these 100+ days a couple weeks ago, we've got all this moisture was great, but then we get all this fuel on the ground. And I'm sure as y'all have driven, I drove by some Johnson grass the other day. I swear it was 6 foot tall. And I thought, oh gosh, when that dries out, that's going to be a mess. So it's always something, but we're very, very fortunate in Oklahoma to have some wonderful, wonderful folks who are part of our forestry division. But I never want to forget our volunteer folks and our rural fire folks, who it has to be a team effort to make that happen.
Well, and especially in you're dealing with some of the smaller volunteer fire departments that are in Roger Mills County, but they also depend on the people on the other side of the state line, and I'm sure that your folks work with the Texas and the Kansas counterparts whenever they get to that.
We do. We're part of the Southern Compact, Southern Fire Compact.
Right.
So we've got staff right now in Louisiana and in Texas. So if we don't have fire situations here, they're taking dozers and other equipment down there to help. And then when things ramp up here, we'll pull back. But it's kind of lends to that bigger kind of ag community, help out everybody. It's certainly that same scenario there.
I guess for those folks that aren't in the state, or maybe are focused on one area or the other, like, what do you see as the biggest challenges or issues for Oklahoma ag that you guys are going through right now? I know that can change by the day,
right?
but what are you guys going through right now that you see as a big thing that addresses Oklahoma ag?
I think the thing that two things I'll tell you. One that I worry about a lot, and I don't have a good answer for it, is consumer perception of what we do in ag. And you can pick the animal ag side of thing or just any production ag things, especially as I've had the chance to travel. The European Union has some strong feelings on how things should be done, and they have a lot of votes. The U.S. has 1 vote, and when they've got 33, I think it is, when we start talking about some of those issues, that's concern. And here's my concern with that. I think consumer choice is incredibly important. So whatever you want to choose for you and your family, I think that's great. Do you know what I mean? And we've got all variety of things, right? You can talk about organic, cage-free, go down the list, and that's great. But I think it's so important for consumers to know when you start demanding different things that everyone has to adhere to, so essentially more regulation, that means food becomes more expensive. And I don't know that there's always that correlation there, because I want to say if you want to go buy, the $10 potatoes at this grocery store, that's okay, but not. And we've got food insecurity issues here in the state of Oklahoma. So then more regulations, more expensive food, more hunger issues around the world. So that's certainly one that I worry about a little bit. And then the other, and I grew up more on the livestock side of things, but animal health issues continue to be very challenging for us. I never thought that people would ask me so much about eggs, but several months ago when people are like, Blayne, why are eggs so expensive? What's happening with eggs? And then you try to have this conversation about, highly pathogenic avian influenza, and they're like, I don't get there. I'm not getting there. But we've been watching and preparing for African swine fever since 2019, as we saw it start in China and move its way across the world. And those, since we are such a livestock heavy state, those certainly are devastating for us, but then the impact that we can have on other states is really, really concerning. And that's as much as we prepare and try to be proactive and do all the right things, those are just tough things to kind of manage because we're in such a global market, which is good, but challenging at the same time.
It's interesting because I guest lectured a couple weeks ago, and you said the food insecurity, and because there was a quote over the summer that says the U.S. has probably the safest and the most secure food chain in the world, but it has probably the lowest perceived safety, in that people that think that our food is so bad because pesticides, GMOs, food waste, all this and all that, and you can go on down the list, but it's a big and it's a growing issue throughout the whole. I think when everybody pulls their groceries out, I think they see that. So, it seems like it's an education thing. I know you say you didn't have an answer, but I'm going to push. I'm going to push a little bit further on it. But I mean, is it an education thing, or where are we? Because I mean, barring the EU, let's just talk about domestically, and even in this state, like where are we lacking on that?
I think it's absolutely an education issue. And you think Oklahoma as a rural state, right? I think if you ask most folks, they'd consider us a flyover state or a rural state. But even in the schools here in Payne County, there's a lot of kiddos that don't know. I mean, they're going to say, what's that green stuff out there, right? Is that grass?
Right.
Do you know, I mean, that we just have got, and that's a heavy lift. And certainly I love to promote things like our Ag in the Classroom program and the team that does that, but I'd love to have tenfold of them to be out there. But it's just this, and I don't even know what, used to be 3 generations from the family farm. Now it's probably 4 or 5, maybe.
Right.
I haven't heard the latest statistic on that, but people have just very limited exposure, so they see something on the television or social media or however they receive their news, and so they make this decision that, okay, this is my friend who said XYZ is not good or we shouldn't purchase this. Well, then it's hard to ever turn that type. But I think the one thing is, and I mean, I'm married to a cattle guy who just wants to drive the feed truck and be at the barn and doesn't want anybody to bother him, right? Okay,
Yep.
He's wonderful, but he doesn't, we just have not been as intentional, I don't think, about telling our stories. And I think we have shied away from some tough issues. And I think when we haven't had those frank discussions and people think, oh, well, they're not showing us what, I mean, I'll pick the sensitive ones. They're not showing us the poultry house or the hog house or the feedlot. So and I'm like, just why does it not bother us? Because we've seen it. And
Right.
we know we follow all the best practices from AVMA and all the science and all, but people just haven't seen it. And I think it scares them sometimes because they haven't. And people love to believe they're friends, which I do too. But sometimes that might be misguided perception, and perception is reality to folks sometimes.
Well, and there really needs to be, there's influencers on all different types of genres, but I mean, I think of one, well, he's right here in the room. Randy Taylor is a great influencer whenever it comes to representing agriculture.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
He's like, where's this going,
There's a
Dave?
newsflash there. No, I'll tell you this, because you were talking about all that, Blayne, and I know that my wife is she kind of gets tired of me telling her who's an idiot and who isn't.
See, he's influencing.
because it's like she gets this because she grew up in Oklahoma City. I mean, she didn't grow up around agriculture, and I spent most of my life, in agriculture, at the university. But it's like she'll say, "Well, this is just I get this food because of this," and I'm like, going, "Doesn't matter." I said that's completely irrelevant. There's nothing true about that at all. Well, so and so said this. I'm like, well, they're an idiot, and so
So we might not try to educate that way.
But it's
but you say we won't have the hard conversations. But and unfortunately, I grew up in. I mean, we all live in a peer-reviewed world.
Yeah.
Now we don't call
That's
each
right.
other idiots,
That's right.
but it's like usually.
Okay.
But this stuff has to stand up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can't
that's
just say something
Yeah.
that you can't stand. So it's my whole life has been people reviewing my work
for sure.
Yeah.
whatever I say.
Yeah.
And so to me, I'm like, I treat other people that way too. If you're going to say something, then you better be able to defend it.
And I
so
think
that's a real challenge.
That right there is kind of just paints a perfect picture, because we all, I think, around the table believe in science, right? And peer-reviewed science. But so much emotion now, I think, makes decisions for folks. That makes a decision for them in the grocery store. It makes a decision so many places, and your emotion doesn't have to have science behind it necessarily. And I think that I think kind of a funny time of this makes me feel safer,
Right.
or they made me feel better, or that made me feel worse. So that's how I'm going to make decisions. And boy, I don't know that all the time that's the best way to go, but I think so many things are emotionally, especially when we talk about the animal ag world.
Yeah.
The emotion is really driving, I think, a lot of those things.
Yeah. Well, you can hear we've got on local radio, there's a company that's looking for people, 15-acre farms, that, do you want to raise chickens? And I think, personally, that's great, because now you're sitting here going, these chickens are looking for a place to die, and now my job is to keep them alive.
Yeah.
And
They just need to get
that's
sheep
very
next,
true.
right?
yeah. And so to me, it's something. It's like, okay, get a little bit of experience
That's right.
here, and then put a pencil to it, and so I think that the more food that we can grow locally, I think the better off we are. The bottom line is we know that there's not enough space locally to grow it.
Agreed.
And so and I think some people need to understand that it's like, well, yeah, I want local food. Well, what's local? Is that 200 miles? I think USDA calls it, I think it's 300 miles.
It's 400 for our local school program, local food for
Wow.
school. Which,
400 miles.
Yeah, and then your debate is how local. Do you know how
Yeah.
local
Yeah.
is
Is
that?
Yeah, to go 400
but-
miles from Stillwater.
Right.
And where are you
Right.
getting? I mean,
So that's the thing. I think so many people want things, and then you talk about the realistic implementation of that, or that you say, okay, here's the cost of that
Right.
too.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't like big ag, and I'm like, that's okay. But economies of scale help you to have the most affordable food in the world.
Right.
So if you want affordable, it's interesting that I feel like people want us to go back to old McDonald's farm. And I'm like, there's a reason that we didn't do that. There's a reason we've gotten to where we are, so people can go do other jobs, and 2% of the population is feeding everybody else. So
I don't want to hoe corn. Some people might want to.
Take offense to that.
Yeah.
But
Apparently our grad students like to, right?
Yeah, our grad students
that's
love
good.
to.
That's good labor. Good labor force.
But I think it was said a minute ago is that, well, and I'll go. I heard one point in time, when people come into the state and they get these big crowds and people want to hear it, is they talk about hope. And they come and they preach hope, and that's where they get crowds, because, like you said, people want to feel good. Well, we have feel-good stories. It's kind of like you said, your husband just, but he's got the feel-good stories,
Sure.
and I feel like that's the disconnect. Not only politically, if we get very divided as a state and a country, but I feel like just from a socioeconomic, we've just divided up what people do in your own little bubble, and I think the lack of mixing has really separated those two, and that's a tough line to get back over. Because I think the amount of distrust that those two or various sectors have against each other is very high, and it's got to be. And I like data. I'm a scientist too, but I mean, tables can't help the mother of two that's in Tulsa. I mean, she doesn't want to see tables.
That's right.
She wants to hear a good story, and she wants to see that farmer, that grower that's grazing or that's raising their stuff. So I think that's kind of what we've lost in agriculture right now, is that we have the feel-good stories. We have the hope. We just aren't connecting the hope to the people that need it. And I think that's a clear issue we have right now. Thoughts and points.
I am ready to vote for you, man.
Yeah.
I'll be running here in a couple years, just city board or something.
Yeah.
So it was pointed out to me a few years ago. It's like everybody wants to know where their food came from.
Until they find out.
But nobody gives a flip where their tires came from, and they'll get on the interstate and drive 85 miles an hour on a set of tires. They know nothing about these tires, but got to know where my hamburger came from.
Well, and I think part of that, you mentioned like the mom in Tulsa with 2 kids. I think there has been such a pressure put on, and being a mom, I'll kind of pick that, but that are you making the best decision for your kids? And I think that has kind of ramped that up then too, because I mean, for me, I'm the grocery shopper at our house, but then you're thinking, oh gosh, do you know what I mean? I want to make sure that I'm providing the best nutrition and the best. So then I think, obviously, I have the chance to talk to ag experts all the time, right? If I do have an opinion about any certain thing, I can usually get on the horn with someone and say, okay, tell me, am I seeing this the right way? But for a lot of folks, they don't have that touch point, right? So then they pivot to, I think, sometimes social media or whatever the easiest information to access. And I think so many, I say moms, but grandma or guardian or parent who they're trying to make the best decisions. And then I think they get sometimes down this road that is maybe not what they kind of hoped it was. And a lot of people, we have a big discussion about labeling of items and, people. And I'm just like, I think people assume that what's on the label, do you know what I mean? That they interpret a lot of things from that label that's probably different than what we all do because of the jobs and the opportunities that we have to see things. So
to kind of what they were talking about, there's also the farmers markets, and that's a fine opportunity, but there's not one in every community. There's not, they're not always accessible, but there is an opportunity to go see the guy that raised the beef or, harvested the spinach or whatever. And that also falls on, there are opportunities through the Department of ODAF also. The Department of ODAF, is that right?
Department of Ag, Food, and Forestry. You're right. You're on the right path there. You're good.
But,
You're good.
yeah.
We've seen tremendous growth in farmers markets, especially since COVID.
Right.
Because I think a lot of people, kind of the point woke up and they're like, "Whoa, where's this food coming from?" I always say I should have done a lot of things, but should have kept a log of all the phone calls that we got during COVID because kind of April, we'd get kind of these continuous calls of, "Do you know that there's no pork at the grocery store?" Yes, we do. Man, we're aware of that. Well, don't y'all have some big warehouse somewhere that you could send something? I mean, truly adults think that we as a Department of Ag are distributing that product. And so we had lots of growth in farmers markets because a lot of folks, wanted to know where it was, but then suddenly too, they're like, I want to support my local producer. But too, a unique conversation there is sometimes those items are more expensive at the farmer's market than their local supermarket. And so then that becomes an educational opportunity as well. But I think we'll continue to see a lot of growth in that area.
So you're forestry too. So where's all the toilet paper? It was over by the pork, I guess, wasn't it?
I will say that is some college kid that to this day is like, I created mass panic across the United States when there wasn't ever any reason to pay. I mean, I do think it's some brilliant college kid that somehow, figured out the algorithm to tell us all there wasn't any toilet paper. So.
I still remember walking into a store and seeing toilet paper and being like, I'm not going to tell anybody because there's a row of toilet paper. Oh my gosh. And then I sent a text to a friend. I was like, hey, if you need toilet paper, I pick some up, or it's at, say, Homeland or whatever. I mean, they were there, and I thought, oh, boy, this is serious.
Or you see someone pushing a basket, and they have more than the limit.
Right.
You're going, wait a minute.
Citizens arrest. Yeah.
Clorox wipes, too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I was going to go serious, but I'm going to have to back out because I can't go into that. Since we're kind of on the time. So is there a pet project that you've had or got, that one little project, or is it just everything, is it?
There's been lots of projects, of course, and some of those intentional, some of those that kind of got thrown at us. One thing that I'm very proud of our team, and I'll pivot back to 2020, is the governor directed $10 million of CARES funds towards the protein processing sector here in the state.
Which was the testimonies going on, and so you're actually hitting both of them.
Yes.
So there you go.
So I said, this is important. We need to do this. Now, it was a weird, too, because they're like, Blayne, we see all these facilities across the U.S. having trouble, and you're wanting to fund it. That was a hard concept. And then I thought, okay, we got this $10 million, and then we have wonderful staff. Jason Harvey, who some of y'all may know, Jason headed that up. And I was like, Jason, what are we going to do if nobody applies for this money? Because I'd made this big pitch of we need this, we need this. Well, we had over $110 million in applications for $10 million. Ended up 41 different facilities in the state applied for those funds, and very proud to say that those are still going, and a lot of them have expanded. Now, we also acknowledge when we talk about just pure kill capacity, right? This is not a 5,000 head facility, but we have these wonderful stories, and that's something we should work on, is sharing some of those. In a small town like Sterling, they added 10 jobs in their processing facility. Well, that's 10 more adults that get to stay in town to
Right.
work, right? And then those kiddos are in the school and they're not having to commute. They're not, I mean, I'm very passionate about rural economic development because I love that commerce chases the 1,000 jobs,
Right.
however many thousands of job. But when so my kids go to school at Ripley, which is east of Stillwater, a new business in Ripley, 3 to 5 jobs there, that's a game changer for folks. And we've got those communities all across Oklahoma. So that's a project and I can't take any credit. Our team did all the work to process those applications and make all that happen. And a big thank you certainly to the governor for letting us utilize those funds, but certainly a success and on a short timeline. We're like, and we have to get this done in 90 days. Everybody go. But have seen some real good success from that.
Is there any, because the Secretary of Ag is always kind of on a time limit. You're not going to have this job 4 years from now, more than likely.
Correct. It is an appointed position,
appointed
so your
position,
time is ticking down.
So
yes.
as you look at it, is there a couple things that you'd still like you're trying to get done in your term?
One thing, and we've kind of started this, but we did start an Ag Youth Council, which is high school seniors there at the agency. I talked about being passionate about rural economic development, but I'm really passionate about encouraging young people into the ag field, whatever that might be. If they want to be an agronomist, if they want to be a veterinarian, so kind of trying to build a good structure that continues to exist once I'm gone, because I have been at the agency under different leadership, and projects kind of ebb and flow depending on who leadership is. But the other piece, and then again this will pivot some to my livestock sector, is a huge challenge that we have is a lack of veterinarians and a lack of large animal practitioners. And we've got, Dr. Shrum and worked with the legislature and got some wonderful funds here for CVM at OSU. But that we think about the livestock side, but we've also got to have those folks. We've got to have DVMs in processing facilities. USDA doesn't have enough veterinarians. So anything that we can do to kind of bolster that effort at the national level, really, because I think that's where we need to see some things come in. And then the final piece, and I kind of hadn't really ever thought about it this way, but land grants do this very unique work here in the United States, and the funding specifically for research at land grant universities, I think, produces some of the most ultimately kind of life-changing products isn't the right word for it, but just the impact. Even if we're here at we can talk about wheat. When you look at the wheat improvement team and Dr. Carr, you think like you're feeding more ultimately all of that is feeding more people every day. So anything that I can do to kind of encourage from that federal level just greater awareness of land grants and funding research, because the research plus the extension, that's how much cooler can that be, right? So lots of things, but really just trying to, I think the more we talk about things and somebody starts picking it up, then someone goes, oh, we didn't know that was a problem. Well, it is. We need your help. Please help us.
So from that standpoint, how often do you interact with legislators that are from certain areas and help educate them about agriculture? I imagine that's an ongoing job of yours.
It is. We certainly spend a lot of time here at the state level. Again, we're a rural state, but unfortunately, we have a great legislature to work with, but there aren't a whole lot of them who have a true, what I'd say is ag background.
Right.
Even some of them from more rural areas, I would not say ag is their kind of comfort space. So we have this kind of continual education opportunity with them. But I will say we're very fortunate that leadership, both in the House and Senate, the ag chairs, appropriation chairs have been very good to agriculture. So we're very appreciative of that. So we try to get out into their districts as much as we can when they're not in session to look at those facilities, have them come with us, provide education. And then at the, from the federal level, we're certainly very fortunate to have Congressman Lucas kind of leading that piece for our delegation here. But just spending time in D.C. too, and reminding folks of you're a long way away from the farm, but you really should care about it. And so we spend lots of time up there too. And we haven't tackled Farm Bill, but boy, that one is can be all consuming. And I will not even guess when we will have a next Farm Bill. So they promised us it was going to be September, and we're September. What's today? September 21st, and I don't think it's going to be September. So we'll see.
They meant next year.
Right, 24.
Right.
24, yes.
Next year.
So you're a very busy person. You're a globetrotter. You've been out representing Oklahoma on different continents. Do you ever just get a big
County Fair?
And at the Payne County Fair? Yeah. Do you ever just get downtime and just get a vacation? Do you go to Cabo and say, I can take a breath? Or I mean, you stay pretty busy.
Not really, and just to be honest, it's a bit with having my daughter's in 6th grade and my son's a sophomore in high school, and my husband and I just talk about. This is just, I know. This is a busy season of life.
Oh,
and you can never script your life, of course. I don't know that I would have chosen to do this job at this season of my life, if that makes sense, with my kiddos so busy.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just, you take the opportunity when it presents itself. So not much, and too, because even if I have downtime from work, then it's like, Mom, can you come help us at the barn?
Right.
Or my husband. Now, I will not pretend that I work cows with my husband because we'd probably not stay married.
What's that shirt that says, I'm sorry for what I said while we were working cows?
Yeah. I can drive the truck and trailer, and but actually working cows together is not something that we do.
Right.
But I feel so fortunate, though, because a lot of times I spend my time in Oklahoma City at the Capitol, and you kind of get in this mode of this, but then I drive home down a gravel dirt road to my house, and then you're reminded these are the people that we're all supposed to be working for.
Yeah.
And so it's very nice. It is probably the busiest season of my life that I will ever have, more than likely, but feel very, very fortunate to have all of those things to be able to do. Now, we didn't talk about we're in ag leadership together. We should have talked about
dropped that one. I was going to let you kind of build on that.
We should have dropped that. So we won't tell all those stories about traveling around the world together. So,
but it's a great program. We are both alum, class 15, ag leadership, 2-year program. I can't remember how many times you get to see the state. We saw forestry, we saw catfish, we saw panhandle, we saw canna flowers, far southwest cotton, and then out-of-state opportunities up into Kansas, go up into Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., then an international trip. And it's really an opportunity to grow your knowledge of the state, grow your leadership skills, and also get out beyond the state boundaries and see really ag on a national and international level.
And talk to people that I would not say our whole group had the same opinions about a lot of things. But that was
agree.
okay. I mean, it was this reminder of us, even within ag leadership, some folks had very strong opinions. So tell Ron Hayes we did a promo for ag leadership for him, but it was a tremendous opportunity.
Well, thank you so much, Secretary Arthur, for coming in and putting up with the guys here on the Red Dirt Agronomy podcast.
Thank you for having me. It was wonderful.
Thank you for listening in on this conversation of the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. And if you'd like to join the next discussion, send us an email, podcast@reddirtagronomy.com, or send us a tweet. Our handle is Red Dirt Ag. We would like to thank Oklahoma's Secretary of Agriculture, Blayne Arthur, for joining us on this podcast today. To find out more about her or any of our guests, along with any of the resources that we talked about in today's podcast, visit reddirtagronomy.com. There you'll find show notes, and you can listen to past episodes too. For Dr. Josh Lofton, Dr. Brian Arnell, and Dr. Randy Taylor, I am Dave Deacon, and we all want to thank you for listening. The proceeding is a copyrighted recording of Ag Now Media, LLC 2023. And yes, all rights are reserved.